Chapter 7. Chapter 7. Dear Eliza, I know you said that you wouldn't be able to reply to us this summer, but that won't stop me from sending letters to you instead. I have to admit I have missed Italy, although I'm sure it's going to take me a while to get used to the cold Scottish weather again when I return. I can't believe our first year at Hogwarts went so quickly. Mother was very pleased to learn that I am already a member of the underclassmen court, although now she has started dating again, i.e. looking for prospective victims. I don't see her much. I never thought I would miss you all, but the longer these summer holidays drag on, the more I am willing to trade my favorite Italian pastries to spend an hour in your company. I know you are most likely rolling your eyes at me, but as you can't reply, I may be as dramatic as I like counting down the days until we are reunited. Blaze, dear Eliza, the summer holidays are dragging on for me, and I simply have to assume they are for you too in the Muggle world. Grandfather is out most days, attending to business, which I can't decide is a good or bad thing. I don't think I have ever been more aware of how lonely our family manor is until now, when I have become used to the hustle and bustle of the common rooms. I am missing my chess partner. I hope that you're coming up with further ways to improve our house, standing no matter what you're doing. I know you've probably already finished your homework. I can't wait for the content to get harder just to see you struggle, just a bit. It would be nice to see you fall to the same standards as us lowly mortals. Wishing you the best, Theo, dear Eliza. I do so wish you weren't shunted off into the Muggle world over summer. Mother's holding the summer gala this year, and it would be lovely if you could have attended. After all, your company is certainly better than the twittering dullards I am forced to put up with instead. I never truly appreciated just how long 6 weeks are until now when I want them to be finished. I love my family, but I think I may love Hogwarts just that bit more. Astoria keeps begging me for stories, and even though we bicker, I can't wait for her to join us at Hogwarts. I know you would love her. I know you won't respond, but I did hear something that might interest you. Rumor has it that Draco has landed himself in a rather large amount of trouble. Apparently his father is incredibly disappointed that he lost his standing in court to that wretched Potter girl, and that even his grades are below a filthy mudblood. Draco is slowly becoming the Malfoy disappointment. They really should learn not to air their family's dirty laundry in public places, but I certainly won't be the one to tell them. I miss you, even Blaze and Theo, and I can't wait till we see each other again. Yours, Daphne, dear Eliza. Happy birthday, my creepy little Slytherin. I will keep this message short no matter how much it pains me. I hope the Muggles don't get you down, and that you enjoy the gift. Yours, Blaze, dear Eliza. First of all, happy birthday. I want you to know that I went through great pains to get this book for you, because all of your extracurricular reading is morally dubious at best, and actually illegal at worst. Secondly, I heard from my grandfather that you got a warning for underage magic. I know you can do wandless magic, Eliza. It's not exactly a close-kept secret after what happened with Rosia. What happened? Hoping you are well, Theo, dear Eliza. Happy birthday. How does it feel finally being the same age as the rest of us? I won't keep you from unwrapping your gifts for too long, but I will say that me, Theo, and Blaze are planning to meet up in Diagon on August 19th, and it would be wonderful if you could meet us. Yours. Daphne. Eliza smiled when she read through Daphne's note and set it aside with the others. She went back to packing her meager belongings. Although definitely not her strangest birthday, her 12th was far away from normal. She hadn't even had a chance to unwrap her presents before she had been accosted by a madhouse, elf calling itself Derby. It had told her under no circumstances was she to go back to school, and even pointing out that she stayed in the hovel that was the orphanage hadn't changed its mind. It had then gone on to decide that the only way to get Eliza to not go to Hogwarts would be to expel her. It had levitated the broth that had been on the stove and promptly dumped it all over the floor, which meant Eliza was threatened both by the matron, who was raving about how sinful children needed punishment, and a letter from the ministry warning about the use of underage magic. After that, Eliza decided she had stuck around the orphanage long enough and had informed the matron that she would be leaving for boarding school a bit earlier this year, and dashed upstairs to pack what little she had lying about her room. She had enough funds to allow her a 3-week stay in Diagon. Plus, she had to check in with the goblins and see how well her investments were faring. She shoved her presents, still unopened, into her trunk and locked it, flinging her ratty leather jacket over her shoulders as she left. Good riddance. Eliza spent her last weeks of the summer holiday in Diagon feeling happier than she had been since the end of June. Her investments were doing well, and Eliza knew she at least had enough money to live comfortably until she turned 17, and so didn't feel guilty when she splurged on some new books and clothes to go alongside the gifts her court had given. Blaze had given her a book on mind magic, which he thought she would find interesting, his assessment turning out to be completely right. When she had read the preliminary chapters, it had instantly reminded her of Sherlock Holmes' Mind Palace from the detective books she used to read. She had always been interested in the concept, and she found working on her occlumency quite fun. Thea had also gifted her a book, and Eliza was actually considering hugging the boy in thanks, as he had gifted her a tome from his old family library on blood magic. Daphne had broken the mold, and instead of giving Eliza books, had instead gifted her with several gorgeous hairpins that Eliza took great pleasure in wearing. She still wasn't used to enjoying the luxuries the wizarding world provided, but that didn't mean she didn't like to indulge in them. August 19th arrived faster than she thought it would, and soon she was waiting downstairs in the leaky cauldron for her court to arrive. Blaze arrived first, elegantly stepping out of the fireplace in a way Eliza wasn't sure she'd manage. "Ciao, Eliza," Blaze said, greeting her warmly, his skin even darker after months in the Italian sun. "Is it possible for you to have gotten even more beautiful since we parted?" he said, wiggling his eyebrows. Eliza scoffed in response, rolling her eyes fondly. Blaze always turned into an incorrigible flirt whenever he spent time with his mother. It had happened after Yule and Easter break as well. Eliza was saved from responding when the flu flared again as Daphne stepped out, fixing her blonde hair. "Eliza, it's so good to see you," she exclaimed happily, making an aborted move to hug her. "It's good to see you too, Daphne," said Eliza warmly instead. Her court knew about her aversion to touch quite well. It wasn't that Eliza didn't trust the others, but after living so many years completely alone, Eliza found casual intimacy hard to deal with. The others didn't seem to mind and never questioned it, which Eliza was thankful for. Daphne and Blaze fell into easy conversation beside her, and Eliza kept one eye on them and the other on the fireplace. They weren't waiting long before Theo arrived. "Ah, Eliza, well met," he said happily, stepping out of the flue, brushing his robes. "It's been too long," he said before bringing a hand up to meet his lips with a smile. Eliza chuckled at his traditional ways and greeted him just as warmly. "And what about me, Theo? Have you not missed me?" Blaze pouted as Daphne giggled at their antics. "They do say that absence makes the heart grow fonder, Blaze, but that saying can't be applied to you," Theo retorted easily with a smirk on his face. Eliza laughed and began ushering them all out into the alley to complete their school shopping. Absence makes the heart grow fonder indeed. It was with great reluctance they all walked into Flourish and Blots after completing all their other errands. The crowd outside the bookstore hadn't lessened like they had hoped, but rather seemed to have swelled. Apparently the man who had written half of their book list this year was doing a signing. Eliza didn't even want to spend money on the books themselves, never mind the twit of an author, who names an actual textbook, Holiday with Hags. Eliza stared at the giant crowd of people in the bookstore with an increasing amount of dread. What if just one of us goes in and buys all our books for us? Daphne suggested, staring at Blaze. "You would sacrifice me, Daph. And here I thought I was your favorite. Poor misguided soul, it might be best to put him out of his misery, Eliza," Theo commented from beside her, his shoulder brushing against hers. Eliza laughed softly, shaking her head. "We go in together. It would be far too many books for one person to carry," said Eliza, stepping into the overcrowded bookstore and instantly regretting not taking Daphne up on her suggestion. Being in Diagon for the past few weeks had gotten her somewhat used to crowds, but she still detested being surrounded by masses of people. They battled their way through the crowd, picking up the books on their list, wading through everyone to reach the counter. Usually, Eliza would scan the shelves for more interesting books than the standard book of spells, but at this point, she simply wanted to leave. Unfortunately, the universe didn't care about her needs, and acted only to make her miserable through a myriad of small inconveniences. Gilderoy Lockhart began speaking, scanning the crowd, and then his gaze landed on her. He stared, then leapt to his feet, positively shouting, "It can't be Eliza Potter." Eliza didn't even get a chance to escape before he grabbed her arm and drew her to the front as the crowd burst into applause. "Nice big smile, Eliza," Lockhart said through his own gleaming bright teeth. "Together you and I are worth the front page." Eliza was torn between punching him in the face or smiling prettily for the cameras. Deciding the fallout with the press would not be worth punching Lockhart in his stupidly straight, shiny teeth. Eliza smiled pleasantly at the camera. Multiple flashes blinded her, and Lockhart took that opportunity to drape his arm across her shoulders. Eliza physically recoiled at the contact, but Lockhart simply kept on talking. Eliza had no idea she would shortly be getting much more than just my book Magical Me, but in fact she and her school fellows will be getting the real Magical Me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the new defense against the dark arts professor of Hogwarts. The crowd cheered, and Eliza finally slipped away, heading straight for her court, who were stood there, tension filling them, expressions ranging from worried to murderous. "I bet you loved that, didn't you, Potter?" Malfoy's voice rang out across, and Eliza scowled, turning around to face him. "Famous Eliza Potter can't even go into a bookstore without making it to the front page. Leave it alone, Eliza. It's his ego talking. He just hasn't accepted he's no longer the most important person in the room," Daphne snarked, standing beside her. Their growing argument was interrupted, however, by Lucius Malfoy and Arthur Weasley actually physically brawling in the middle of Flourish and Blotz. All five of them stopped arguing to stare in vague horror and more than a bit of amusement as the two adults swung punches at each other. "How very Muggle," Theo commented simply, and Eliza suppressed a grin when Malfoy turned bright red. "Good luck keeping this out of the society columns, Malfoy," said Blaise over his shoulder as they walked away out of the steadily emptying bookstore. At least, Eliza didn't have to waste her money on the books. The 1st of September arrived quickly after that, and Eliza was excited to finally be going back to Hogwarts. She had shrugged into her uniform that morning and dragged her trunk downstairs. If she was at the orphanage, she would have had to walk to the station. But at the Leaky Cauldron, she could simply use the Flu connection, so she had been able to take her time getting ready. Finally fluing to King's Cross, she smiled at the sight of the Hogwarts Express and weaved through the crowd to climb aboard. She walked down the aisle of the train, nodding at the other Slytherins she passed by and striking up conversation with others in her year. A well-placed, "Oh, it's nice to see you again," or "Did you have a nice summer?" worked wonders, and it was always nice to have people on her side. It also helped that Susan Bones was related to Amelia Bones, head of magical law enforcement. Eliza wasn't particularly planning to commit anything illegal, but her book collection was already bordering on being morally dubious. It was best to be prepared. Eliza finally found the compartment she had used last year. It was all the way at the back of the train and guaranteed at least some privacy for her and her court when they found her. Eliza pulled out a book from her messenger bag on the different runic alphabets when her fingers brushed past the penknife she had stored in her messenger bag. There had been a lot more muggings around Eliza's area of London this summer. More than before. That's what happens when unemployment reaches those heights. Eliza fished the small blade from her bag, and in a burst of possessive immaturity, dropped to the floor, intending to carve her initials beneath the seat. She crawled under fingering the blade, only to find that someone else had had the same idea. Next to the other pair of initials, Eliza carved her own in satisfaction before crawling back out. TMR and ELP, maybe they had been a Slytherin too. Everyone in her house was a bit of a possessive prat. Halfway through the train ride, her court finally arrived, interrupting her reading with bright grins and loud laughter, but Eliza didn't mind. The ride to Hogwarts passed by a lot quicker this time round. The feast this year was honestly quite uneventful in comparison to last year's. No snide remarks or insults, no horrified whispering, not even any warnings about possible horrific death from Dumbledore. It was refreshing. Eliza even got to watch as the new firsties were introduced to the snake pit as this year's prefects ran over the obligatory rules. Folly had been their guide last year before handing them off to Rosia, and Eliza was still fond of the older girl. It was even sad to see Roll leave last year. The new Slytherin king was a complete buffoon in her opinion. Blishwick had only 2 brain cells to rub together, and he would be incredibly lucky to get a spark at all. He had 2 settings which were spouting pureblood supremacy and talking Quidditch. Sometimes he even managed to do both at the same time, which was quite impressive for him. He was as thick as a flabberworm, but due to him being a part of the sacred 28, no one was willing to challenge him. Incompetency of a leader and the laziness of society could always be found, but Eliza was sad to find it even here in Slytherin. Eliza sighed despondently and turned back to Theo, who was setting up the chess board. If she was lucky, she might even win this time. The firsties were ushered upstairs, and Eliza flicked her wand down to her hand. She hadn't known on her first night, but the first years were ushered to their dorms early so the rest of Slytherin could sort out their internal house politics without endangering them. Eliza didn't remember any house politics in her first week either, as she learned the mechanics, so it obviously worked. Eliza didn't really expect to be challenged for her place. She was still ruling the underclassmen court, and this year's third years were far more obsessed with Quidditch than house politics. But sometimes it didn't hurt to be paranoid. Theo moved his rook forward with a smirk, and Eliza scanned the board for any possible traps whilst also keeping an eye on the common room. As she predicted, the third years didn't seem to mind that Eliza was in charge and were happily chatting by the fire. It seemed as though her rule would be unchallenged. She goes against everything Slytherin stands for. If you have a runt in the litter, you put it down. Blishwick's voice reached Eliza's ears, and Eliza felt a cold, familiar rage fill her. Eliza had never been quick to anger. Yes, she had a temper. Yes, it was easy to irritate her, but it took a lot to make her truly angry. And unlike the famous Gryffindor temper, it never ran hot. Eliza's anger was always cold, icy, the kind that numbed your veins and shuttered your eyes. The kind of anger that made you sharpen your teeth, because you always feel the vicious, vindictive urge to bite back. Eliza was tired of these people, these sheep questioning her. Her pride was not a quiet thing, and it rattled her bones when she was belittled, thought of less than what she was, what she would achieve. Last year's king might have been content to leave his little pet mudblood alone, but I'm not, Blishwick snarled, smiling widely as his court cheered him on around him. Soon a dueling ring was formed around them, cheering Blishwick on, spitting at her. Although she was pleasantly surprised to see a few subdued at the back, Rosier and his crowd staring at her with a clear look of fear in their eyes. Blishwick didn't even give Eliza time to study him, to reach for her wand, before shooting a hex at her. Lightly dancing out of the way, Eliza didn't level her wand at him and simply dodged as his spells got darker and darker and unspooled her magic. The raw power flooded through her veins and drifted around the room, and Eliza wished she could take a moment to revel in the heady power of it. "You're nothing, Potter. It's time you were reminded of that." "No," Eliza said simply, twirling her wand languidly as she observed Blishwick feeling that anger flood her veins. "You hear that? The mudblood thinks she can talk back to me," he laughed, and the elder Slytherins also burst into raucous laughter. "I think I can do whatever I want, you Blishwick, because you are the one who is nothing," Eliza remarked as she focused her magic on Blishwick, observing impassively as it wrapped itself around him, drowning the threads of his own magic. "Oh yeah," he said cockily, and fired a bombarder which Eliza elegantly shifted to the side to dodge. "And you think I'm going to listen to you?" Eliza smiled then, slow and vicious, and she began to speak in false sympathy. "You will listen, Blishwick, otherwise I'm going to have to do this." Eliza twitched her fingers and listened impassively when Blishwick let out a tortured scream as Eliza snapped his arm, the crack being drowned out by his wails. Or this, she dislocated his shoulder, and he dropped to the ground screaming. "The human body has 206 bones, Blishwick, and I really don't mind breaking each, and every one of them until you do listen," Eliza said calmly, and punctuated her statement by snapping his ankle. Through heavy pants and his sniveling tears, he still managed to speak. "You don't scare me, Mudblood. You're still beneath me," he heaved. Rage consumed her. "Oh, am I?" she hissed venomously, and ignored the way he paled at her tone. Leveling her wand at the cowering form of Blishwick, she cast her first spell of the night. "Duro," she incanted softly, and watched in detached amusement as stone slowly, so slowly, began encasing Blishwick's body starting from the feet up. You know, Muggles have this story about an old guard, Prometheus, who was punished for not knowing his place. Eliza began as the stone travelled up Blishwick's desperately writhing form. He was chained to a mountain, and every day an eagle pecked out his liver only for him to be healed and have the whole process repeat again, she said, as the stone finally crept up to his torso. Now that's too macabre for my taste, but I could keep you encased in this stone until you had to attend lessons. And then every time you came back to Commons, we'd petrify you again. Eliza taunted as the stone wrapped around his throat. And you'd spend the year like that, completely trapped in your own body at the whims of my steadily waning mercy. He tried to scream, but the stone had encased his mouth. You make a horrible person, Blishwick, but I think you'd make a very pretty statue. Eliza drawled, smiling sweetly as tears trailed down his face. Eliza halted the progress of the spell and stared down into his watery eyes. Unless, of course, you can accept your new place beneath me. Eliza offered and laughed when he tried to speak. She flicked her wand and watched as the stone crumbled away. He didn't try to move at first, but then dragged himself up so he was kneeling at her feet. Yes, he says, and almost involuntarily a small, my lady, slipped from him. Eliza smiled softly and ruffled his hair gently before turning to observe the other deathly silent Slytherins. Is anyone here good with healing charms? She asked, and Fawley stepped forward cautiously to tend to Blishwick. Eliza nodded at her and then turned to face the rest of Slytherin. Monster, their eyes said, or they unwilling whispered. I am now the Queen of Slytherin, Eliza said, and had never before been more aware of her age. She sometimes thought she was just a monster trapped in a 12-year-old body. Often she was proven right. Blishwick said, I go against everything Slytherin stands for. Maybe I do go against your ideals, but I am now your ruler and you will treat me as such. I do not care for blood status. Purity is not power. Power is doing what you must to get what you need, and doing it well. She paused here and felt her lips quirk as she said her next words. Magic is might. After all, sharp intakes of breath could be heard after that, but she continued. Slytherins are resourceful, we are cunning, and we are ambitious, but most of all, Eliza said, staring out at the crow amassed before her, we are a family. And family always comes first. You will always come first, she said, and watched as they all shuffle under her intensity. Apart from her court who stands steadfast and proud amidst the crowd, regarding her warmly despite the blood on her hands. I swear that under my rule we will get Slytherin back to its former glory. I refuse to settle for less. She finished with a smirk and nodded her head, dismissing the crowd. Her court immediately amassed around her. Blaise slung his arm across her shoulders, and Theo hesitantly took her hand into his, giving it a proud squeeze as Daphne grinned from in front of her. The rage had retreated now, and Eliza can't help but slump into the light, warm touch of her friends. She may be a monster, but her court would always see her as their hero.